Welcome one and all to Last Stop Penn Station podcast featuring Cary Silkin and Ian Riccaboni. They dive deep into Cary's wealth of stories, and no subject is off limits. From the world of wrestling to his ticket agency, growing up in New Jersey, drug-fueled underground days, hustling in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and endless days and nights in New York City, every story is worth telling.
Hey, welcome everyone. It is our second episode of the new year. Ian Riccaboni, Cary Silkin, welcome to Last Stop Penn Station. Cary, Happy New Year again.
Yes, Happy New Year. Did you get your stimulus check? I didn't get nothing.
Well,
I got hog's dick.
Well, Cary, I think we might be in that group that might, fortunately, I think we have good fortune and we might be priced out of it. But that's okay. That means that other things are going well.
If that bastard don't send them to us, we'll slap a garnishee on him. Yeah, well, Happy New Year, Ian. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. It was a good new year. Getting excited. There's another Ring of Honor bubble coming up. We had a great episode where we showed some unseen matches from the 18th anniversary trip.
Yeah, there was, it was a really... Above and beyond the great wrestling, there was a lot of behind the scenes kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of good comments about that bizarre weekend. The night that you dropped me off, you and Todd dropped me off at the airport. You guys stayed for another day or two, and there were some matches shot. What the hell did we see that Monday night? Lethal?
Yeah, we saw Lethal and Haskins.
Yeah, that's right. I have a note here. Haskins !
Yeah, you do. And Haskins is amazing, and that's a guy. I mean, all the international talent we can't wait to have back. Whether it's Slex or Joe Hendry or Martina, but Mark Haskins deprived of a world title shot because of a pandemic, and he wrestled like a bat out of hell, and he beat Jay Lethal with that amazing sharpshooter, and he hooked the arm and made him tap. And you don't see many people do that to Jay Lethal.
Well, it was nice to see Ring of Honor re-signing Mark Haskins. Number one, because we want him on our team.
Yeah.
And number two, for me, it's the idea of that there's, the powers that be feel that there's hope in sight.
Mm-hmm.
And because, for those that don't know, Mark Haskins is from the UK, and it's very difficult to get in the country if you can get in at all. So there's they're showing some hope that this thing's coming around the bend.
Well, and Bandito also. I mean,
right.
Those are two franchise players, franchise cornerstones that Ring of Honor re-signed, and I'm excited because we got to see him on the last watch along. Him and Flip Gordon and Bandito. We've been talking about his health. I talked to him, and he says he's feeling great. And he said that it was residual from when he had COVID, and he's excited to get back and get cleared. So we're hoping to see him in the next bubble and hope to bring him back to Ring of Honor television immediately.
Very cool.
Yeah, and announced, speaking of our great Mexican stars, Dragon Lee's going to defend the TV title against Ray Oris on an upcoming episode of ROH TV.
Is this upcoming on Monday?
I do not know. I've called the match and I've seen the match, but as of yet, it's upcoming.
They used to use that when they would promote the old the cards of wrestling on TV.
Yeah,
upcoming.
Yeah,
it was like very little. It sort of the word ran. They didn't pronounce it upcoming to Asbury Park. It was upcoming.
Now, who would that be? Because the Fink did it from like 79 to 84.
It was a mystery voice.
Yeah.
My era.
It wasn't Freddie Miller, right? Or Freddie Miller was Crockett, excuse me.
No, it wasn't Joe McHugh.
Yeah.
It wasn't
Capetta.
Gary. And I'm trying to think of the guy. I mean, going way back to my childhood.
The guy that Vince McMahon replaced in D.C.
Well, there was Ray Morgan. Well, Ray Morgan was announcing, so he didn't do the cut-ins.
Gotcha.
But there was a guy, there were two ring announcers, Friendly Bob Freed.
And he mostly did the Garden, right?
He did the Washington, D.C. TV show.
Okay.
And he did the 70s. Matter of fact, I swear this is true.
Okay.
Uncle Henry knew him.
What?
Yeah, like,
What?
like not Uncle Gunny. Uncle Henry, who knew Willie Gilzenberg.
Right.
Who knew Manny Hecklin. And those who've listened to Last Stop Penn Station, Uncle Henry was on my mom's side of the family. He was on the fringe, and his claim to fame, as we've said before, was being the advanced man for Benny Goodman. Now, Benny Goodman was a huge act. He might have been the advanced man for one tour or two tours, and then Henry worked for smaller acts. And I also mentioned that Henry stayed at a hotel. He lived at the Ashley Hotel on 47th Street where Pompero Firpo used to stay when the wrestlers came to town. But Henry knew Friendly Bob Freed.
Wow. Okay.
And I must have been like 15 or 16 with my cousin Mike. And Henry says, if you see Bob Freed coming in, ask him to give you a couple tickets. We already had tickets, and we saw Bob Freed, and I said, "Hey, Bob, I'm Henry Oaken's. I'm his. What am I? I'm his nephew, right?" So he actually, he reaches in his pocket and he gives me the old school hard tickets.
Wow!
Right. I think that might have been my first scalping, because we had 2 extra tickets to sell. But yeah, Friendly Bob Freed. I really don't know who did those cut-ins.
The mystery voice.
It's a mystery voice.
Yeah,
and that's like if I would love to be able to talk to Vince McMahon, the current Vince McMahon, and try to fill in some of these questions.
Yeah.
Because he's like one of the last links.
Right.
That would know this kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, it's a shame guys like Gorilla Monsoon left us so early.
Right.
And because, that guard, that they were the ones that knew. They were the ones that know that minutia that wrestling fans want to know. Who was the disembodied voice?
I was listening to another podcast, John McAdams, Stick to Wrestling. It was an older episode, and they were talking, and his co-host says something about, they're talking about, it was a 70s thing, and the co-host says, oh yeah, and the commissioner, Woody. And John McAdams goes, no, not Woody, Willie. Willie Gilzenberg, right? So, yeah, but there's so much information that's just, that's why we do this show, to try to get out some information, get out some stories, tell about these characters, here comes Lambchop, tell about some of these cultural oddities and experiences. Speaking of which, I'm working on this Elvis book. It is deep.
Really?
And I'm only into the, oh God, when he was starting out, about Colonel Tom Parker.
I sure do. Yeah, even if it's just, my link to Colonel Tom Parker was the Colonel Jimmy Hart, and then from there, I found out it was, an homage to Colonel Tom, the manager of Elvis.
Well, he owned them.
Really?
Basically, there was Sam Phillips,
right,
of the record company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm drawing. Was Sun or Stax?
Stax.
Well, Sam Phillips had a percentage of the records, and Colonel Parker, under the guise of Elvis's parents, because he was only like 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I'm just digging into this, and he's he's touring all over the place, and he's starting to get on these shows. The big act at the time was Bill Haley. Bill Haley and the Comets.
Rock Around the Clock.
Rock Around the Clock. And there was a movie called Blackboard Jungle where they used the Rock Around the Clock song. And that really got Bill Haley out. And Elvis was working on these shows, but, it mainly in the South. And the girls were going crazy. And they were doing tons of shows and making very little money. And I'm just starting to get to the point where his first few records did all right regionally, but I'm getting to the point where his breakout song, which they thought was going to bomb, was Heartbreak Hotel.
Wow.
It was considered like, this is depressing.
Yeah.
If you look at the lyrics to it.
Since my baby left me.
Go ahead.
Found a new place to dwell. Down at the end of Lonely Street, Heartbreak Hotel.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was very down. And they're like, this is no good. But they kept it in sort of it eventually started rocking
blues,
a bit.
Yeah.
But it was a moody piece. But so that's I've been working on that. And Johnny Cash has come into the scene. He's this young guy starting out. And it's getting very interesting. Also, I highly, highly recommend. I forced AJ to watch this. I'd watched it last week. I might have even mentioned it on our last episode, but it was well worth a second watching of this PBS John Lennon. It's called Lennonyc.
Oh, okay.
So Lennon, New York, Lennon, New York City. Mm-hmm. And it's basically a history of when Lennon moved, and Yoko.
Right.
They were being maligned by the press in the UK, especially Yoko.
Right.
They just didn't like her. And they have this, this crazy artsy fartsy stuff she was doing. And they moved to New York City, and they fell in love with New York City. And this is like 71, 72. There's a ton of detail. Lennon got involved. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Mm-hmm. Do you know about the famous love-in, or whatever they called it when they stayed in bed?
Yeah.
Right. But they explain on that, the idea was to get the sign behind them. There was a sign that said love, hair, something else, and peace. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy named John Sinclair who in Ann Arbor, Michigan, was given 10 years for 2 marijuana joints. Two joints. And Ann Arbor is where it's a big college school,
University
right?
of Michigan, yeah.
Right. So this was like outrageous. So Lennon went and did a benefit show. Here's a band that, if you know this name, I'm going to be really surprised, because Lennon played with these guys basically in 71 and 2. Elephant's Memory?
No.
They were like a village avant-garde rock and roll anti-establishment band, and Lennon liked them. Were they great? They were adequate musicians. And so they went out to this John Sinclair thing, and 20,000 people showed up. And guess what? 2 days later, he got out of jail.
Wow.
So they went back to New York. I won't make this too long. They went back to New York, and there was a lot of problems. One of them was do you know about the riot at Attica State Prison?
Yes.
There was like 35 inmates killed, bad conditions. And they also saw a thing on the news by Geraldo Rivera about the bad conditions at some kind of...
mental rehabilitation center.
There you go.
And that state prison, I mean, that was Geraldo's big break. That's what put Geraldo on the map.
So Lennon did 2 concerts. Now, we talked previously about the Great Bangladesh Show at the Garden in 1970. Well, Lennon did this show. It was called One on One or One for One, and it was at the Garden in August of 72. And it was with Elephant's Memory. He didn't have Leon Russell. He didn't have Bob Dylan walking out. He didn't have George Harrison walking out. Nobody. And although the people at the show liked it, it was a sort of a bomb, and the papers gave it a bad write-up. There's so much more. This forced Lennon to have a problem. Well, I don't know if the concert. He started having problems with Yoko.
That led to the Lost Weekend,
which was really a lost
couple of years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're on the ball. And he went out to L.A. Like Yoko basically said, get out. Get out. We can't be, we need a break. And he went out to L.A. and he went, do you know the great May Pang?
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
She's still living. She gave some interviews recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was his lover, for lack of a better term.
Well,
right?
she was more like his
wife.
Concierge.
Okay.
Yoko called her up and says, John's going to L.A. And he's like, he was a guy who didn't do things on his own. Mm-hmm. And so May Pang was his buddy. And he was joined out there by Ringo and Keith Moon and all kinds of Harry Nilsson. And they went hog wild.
Yeah.
They went hog wild. They did get out the album, what the hell is it? The Mind Games album.
Okay.
Which basically had the one hit, Mind Games.
Yeah.
And he was running amok in L.A. with the aforementioned and Alice Cooper, and they're going out every night to the Whiskey A Go-Go and to the Troubadour, and they're getting blind drunk. And he finally comes back to New York, not with Yoko. And when he comes back to New York, he's given up the booze. He's given up the coke. Maybe it was slowly, but he was cutting that. And he's going to do the Walls and Bridges album. Mm-hmm. And he's got a song, Whatever Gets You Through the Night.
Yeah.
And he had Elton John in the studio.
Oh, wow.
And it was really co-written by the two of them.
Wow.
And hi, Lambchop. She wants to be on the podcast. And you know who played guitar for him on that album, as well as the double fantasy in the end?
No.
Was Earl Slick, who you associate with David Bowie, post Mick Ronson.
Gotcha.
And was in a lot of these. He's one of the great New York guitar players, but you associate him with more of a rock. Mm-hmm. And he had some great quotes. But anyway, when they did Whatever Gets You Through the Night, Elton John said to John Lennon, listen, I'm touring. This is 74. Mm-hmm. I'm touring. And John Lennon hadn't been to any shows. He had no familiarity with the way rock shows were going, production, lighting, just the whole scene. And he says, look, I'm going to be at the Garden in November. And John Lennon's like, yeah, that's great. And maybe I'll come. He goes, well, how about you play? And John Lennon's like, look, if Whatever Gets You Through the Night becomes a number one hit, I'll play, all right? It's no shot. Well, guess what? It became a number one hit.
Wow.
And on November 26, 1974, I had tickets for Elton John.
Really?
And the opening act was Kiki D.
Oh, Don't Go Breaking My Heart.
That's right.
Elton John, yeah.
And it was more than a rumor. They were talking on the radio. Like, it was like, oh, there might be a chance, John Lennon, he's back in New York. And about an hour into the set, Elton brought out John Lennon, and they did Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Mm-hmm. They also did, there was a bad movie, a bad Sgt. Pepper's movie.
With Peter Frampton and the Bee Gees. And,
yep,
yeah.
And Elton John did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds in that movie.
Ah, right.
So they did that, and they did the old Beatles standard, I Saw Her Standing There.
John's favorite.
Right.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the show, after Elton's obligatory Your Song and Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, which was probably a number one hit at that point in time, the last song of the night was Bitches Back, and John Lennon came back out and played guitar, and I among the other 120,000 people who say they were at the show.
Yeah.
There's so many people that say,
They were there.
And but that wasn't enough for me, because when that show ended, I went down to meet my other friends at a late night show at your old stomping grounds, the Academy of Music, then to be the Palladium, but it's still the Academy of Music, to see it was like Charlie Daniels, the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, and the great master of the hot rod Lincoln, Commander Cody.
Yeah.
And it was the Late Show.
Wow.
They played it. So I saw it, that's enough for, but yeah, there's more about John Lennon, but you got to check this out.
Isn't that neat when
it gives me a really good appreciation of him?
Isn't that neat when you're going to see somebody and somebody else just comes out of the blue? It's happened to me with Bon Jovi twice, where I've gone to Asbury Park and Bon Jovi. I know the famous stories of Bruce Springsteen shows up, but I've seen Bon Jovi come out twice.
With who?
Jody Joseph. It's his cousin, and she's been a Jersey bar staple for years and years. But both times, and I kid you not, he came out and sang, I saw her standing there.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's the same mindset as the Joe Grishecki.
Sure, and Bruce shows up to Joe Grishecki quite a bit.
Right.
And with Southside Johnny, I've seen Clarence, when Clarence Clemens was alive, Clarence come out. Vinny Mad Dog Lopez, for the big Springsteen fans, he was the original drummer on the first couple of albums. I've seen him come out and play a song with either Southside or with Clarence at his shows. So it's pretty neat to see those guys in action. But I can't even. You must have been thrilled. I mean, hear it.
Well, they on the documentary. I mean, I remember it.
Yeah.
I legitimately remember it. And on the documentary, they were talking about, it was a 10-minute standing ovation, and they have quotes from Yoko saying, the building was going to explode, and quotes from Elton John saying, I've played, because this documentary was probably filmed, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. So Elton, says, I've played all over the world, and I don't want to use a wrestling term, put myself over, but I've never heard an ovation like this. John Lennon coming out to Madison Square Garden, and I don't remember if it was such a long ovation. There's arena tape of the songs. Mm-hmm. There's got to be a bootleg floating around.
And that was at the time too, when a lot of the radio stations would get an exclusive to broadcast it. That was happening, but this was not broadcast. Okay, yeah.
But
MMR in Philly would do a lot of the up and comer, like Springsteen, like Billy Joel.
I went to a Tower Theater show in '88 with MMR doing Toll. Mm-hmm. Which was and they would do whomever. Genesis is in town. Right. They get the rights, but those were few and far between. But yeah, obviously Lennon got a huge pop.
Yeah,
and it was quite a night, and I got to see it.
Amazing. That's something that I never knew of.
46 years ago. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I was 18.
Yeah.
I was a senior in high school. And I went with the great Debbie Shinaki.
Oh.
One of my early girlfriends. Some hot action with Debbie Shinaki.
Wow. Hot action.
And then I just let her take the train home, baby. I'm heading downtown to the Academy.
I have a story about Moby, but I'm sorry, keep going.
No, I want to hear a story. When I left the Garden, I think that this is one of the first times, it's going to sound like a big deal. I was 18, one of the first times I took a cab.
Oh.
I just said, let me take a cab.
That's a scary feeling, hailing your first cab. Yeah. I remember the first time I was told to get a cab.
I think that was it. I just knew to do it.
Yeah. I had two bosses, Diane and Chris, and I worked at a place called the Family NYC. It was an advertising company. They helped match directors to TV commercials. And pretty cool concept. They're kind of like agents. But they said, oh, take a cab to so-and-so. And I'd been a year in New York. I hadn't taken a cab yet. And I remember just standing there trying to figure out, do I put my hand up? Do I wave?
Or are the lights on the cab correct?
Right. And you don't know until, and it's scary. It's scarier than the subway to learn how to hail a cab, in my experience.
Yeah, and it's a good thing when you were starting to hail cabs. It wasn't like when I was with Bellucci,
right.
and my friend hailed the old checker cabs were gone by that point.
Yeah.
But with Bellucci, when my friend hailed the checker cab, and he said, "No, you asshole," and he hailed a small cab.
Right.
He said, "No, you asshole, we need a checker cab." So yeah, there's a little rock and roll for us. I was talking to Mike G today, who's diligently working on the Last Stop Penn Station memoirs. We were working on, God, there's so much. We were working on 2000, so much Ring of Honor stuff. We were working on 2008 today, and in 2008 was such a wild year because that was when we had the Wrestler movie,
right,
which you could hear all about on Last Stop Penn Station, one of our earlier episodes. Mm-hmm. We were in the Wrestler movie with Mickey Rourke and the great Darren Aronofsky film. Why can't I think of the gorgeous woman who's the
Marissa Tomei,
the beautiful Marissa Tomei, where you see Sid selling her a ticket. She wanted nothing. She wanted nothing to do with that damn thing. She just wanted to get that. I mean, I didn't see her once. When I was talking about it today, my cousin goes, "Yeah, I was staring at her for like 20 minutes." I go, "No, you weren't. She was only visible for like 2 minutes,
right.
And then she ran." So we had the Wrestler movie. It was the year we had the change of behind the scenes,
right,
with Adam Pearce coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also, and we did not talk about this yet, we talked about our first trip to Japan.
Right.
But we did not talk about the second trip to Japan.
Well, you and I have talked about it offline. But
so I was telling Mike today about the second trip to Japan, and we go to the first trip to Japan was everything was rosy. One show with Noah at their building. Mm-hmm. We go to Osaka. One show with Dragon Gate. Both of them did their due diligence and sold tickets, and it was pretty much a success. Mm-hmm. The second year. And Gabe loved the Dragon Gate guys.
Right.
He loved them. They
were revolutionary. They were doing things that you didn't see in the United States at the time.
Right. Absolutely. As far as the wrestling, it was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. But Noah, who we were very close with,
right,
they didn't like Dragon Gate and the business tactics and, maybe whether it was... I'm not saying Dragon Gate were bad men, or maybe they weren't the greatest at what I'm going to tell you. So the second year we go there, there's going to be 2 shows once again, and both of them are taking place at the Differ Ariake, the small arena and training center for Noah in Tokyo.
And Noah's still a big deal at this point. They're the number one, if not 1B.
Absolutely.
In Japan. Noah is the cream of the crop.
I might have told the story wrong, but that was the year. The second trip, I believe, was the year they had me. Was when we went to the Karakin Hall. Mm-hmm. Not Karakin Hall. What's the big arena?
Karakin,
yeah. We went to. There was a show there, but so it was one show with Noah, mm-hmm. and the second night with Dragon Gate at the Differ Ariake, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But they were both responsible on their own to sell the tickets. Mm-hmm. So Noah's doing their due diligence, and they've sold, like, we know about a couple weeks before we're leaving, they've sold like 500 tickets. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, what about Dragon Gate? Well, they had sold under 50.
Oh, my God.
Now, how's this possible?
Right.
How's this possible?
Because even if they just brought their 3 top guys, the name value should have sold 100, 200, 300 easy, right?
Well, they must have made a concerted effort not to sell the tickets. The other thing that happened was Dragon Gate was running a show, our show was a B show, really.
Wow.
Because we only had a few of their guys. They were running a show. It would be like, we're at the Hammerstein, right? That's the Differ Ariake is the Hammerstein. And they're running out in Flushing. So they had a second show in Tokyo. Tokyo's huge.
Gigantic.
So they were like 30, 40 miles away, but nevertheless, they were in Tokyo. So that wasn't cool.
Yeah.
So in a desperate effort to help us, Noah found some people to buy some tickets for the second night. And then we didn't want to have, when you only sold 50 tickets, I mean, you got 80 seats in the front row.
Right.
Not to mention second row, third row, so on and so forth. So Noah had to get bodies. So, because our big thing was, we're filming this for DVD.
Right.
Ring of Honor in Japan.
Yeah.
Well, as good as the matches might be, and the matches were good.
I'm going to look those up, so please keep.
Yeah. Now, he's one of my best friends, and he's one of the most talented guys in the history of Ring of Honor. So it's going to come off, but I think this was one of Gabe's mistakes. He was pushing Jimmy Jacobs at the time.
Okay.
And Nigel was champion.
Right.
So there was correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a Jimmy Nigel match. I think it was the second show. It was that Dragon Gate show. And it just didn't work.
Let me take a look. So you are right. So in the Differ Ariake, September 14th, there was Jimmy versus Nigel, and that was for the World Championship. That card also featured Austin Aries versus Tyler Black in the opener. Wow, that's a hell of an opener. Kaz Miyamoto versus Eddie Edwards with Larry Sweeney.
Yes, Sweeney accompanied me.
Wonderful. And did you tell that on the air about in the airport, the folks stopping you with Larry Sweeney and then Larry cutting the great promo later for the TV cameras? Was that this trip?
Well, it was not in the airport. That was they brought us to to help promote. They brought us to it was like a late night talk show.
Wow.
That was,
if anybody has any footage
I'm going to use a reference that you're never going to know this name. Joe Franklin?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
like an overnight late show.
Yeah, but like it's like Uncle Henry would have been on it.
Okay.
So they bring me, Brian Danielson. Okay. I'm like, why are you bringing me? Oh, the owner
respect. Yeah,
the owner is very important. Me, Brian Danielson, I believe Kenta.
Yes.
Not Kenta Kobashi. Kenta.
Right, and he was on this card teaming with Kota Ibushi, the current IWGP Heavyweight Champion.
Okay.
But yes.
And we had Sweeney in the studio, and in the end, they don't have managers in Japan.
Yeah.
And we did a at the end of the show, Sweeney busts in like Freddie Blassie would have.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What do you guys, what do you think, Brian? Well, we get something of that nature.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking through this card. This is amazing. So we talked about Aries Black, Miyamoto versus Edwards, Ishimori, who's a great IWGP Junior right now. He wrestled in the Garden.
Right.
Had the belt in the Garden. He defeats El Generico. Morishima and Davey Richards beat the Briscoes. Brian Danielson wins the Junior Championship, defeating Kanemaru. Kenta and Kota Ibushi versus Marufuji and Nakajima. Kensuke Sasaki versus Roderick Strong. Sasaki had been an IWGP mainstay, New Japan mainstay for years. And then Nigel versus Jimmy for the title. So that's a hell of a card.
That was night 2, I believe.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, after night 2, it was such a financial pounding. I mean, look at the flights.
Yeah.
yeah, staying at the beautiful Why the hotel there, where by this arena, is called the Washington. in English letters,
right?
I have no idea, right? But that's the name of it.
Interesting.
But
especially with the fractured relationship with Japan and the United States over the years. I mean, we're great allies now, but was not always that way.
I'm sure this hotel was built
after,
in the 60s. It looked like, but there was always these businessmen that were hanging around the wrestling companies there. And there was this guy who, prior to us going to Japan, he was a friend of Rue.
We've spoke of Rue. You can go back and listen to the great Rue episodes.
And Rue's no longer with us.
And he appeared in the tribute video for Past versus Present that was posted.
And he deserves it. But Rue had a friend, this Mr. Narita guy, and Mr. Narita. At one time, this might have been 2006, 2007, prior to our going over there, or maybe we had went once. They came over to New York in the summer. Rue with his son, who was like a 11 or 12-year-old, and his best friend was Mr. Narita's son.
Oh.
And they wanted to go to Yankee Stadium.
That's cool.
And Sid tells me, look, you got to get good seats.
Yeah.
You got to get good seats. So, and the Yankees were playing the Red Sox on a Sunday afternoon.
Oh, geez.
So, fortunately, I'm in the ticket business. No one's giving them to me for free. But we had a show that Saturday night in New York City. And we went to the ball game. I was so tired, but we went and, Rue's buying everything. I took him to Bo's store.
Oh, very cool.
He must have spent, like $1,000.
Awesome.
Like Bo's like, I'll hold the stuff for you till after the game. They wanted all this Yankee stuff. But anyway, back to Mr. Narita. So we do the first night. Everything's cool, but we know we're going into, it's like the Cow Palace. We know we're going into a beating, a disaster, right? It'd be like a quarterback, See, what was that last quarterback they put in for the Eagles?
Oh, jeez.
What was his name?
Jalen Hurts and Nate Sudfeld.
It'd be like Sudfeld going back for a pass. He just sees like 8 guys coming at him. So that was what the second night was, and there's nothing we could do. So we get through the night, and Sid comes up to me and says, look, Ken asked, or basically said, that Mr. Narita wants to take us out for dinner. And I'm like, Sid, I don't want to go. I don't care if it's Mick Jagger. I don't care if it's whomever, if it's Madonna, right. Justin Bieber.
Right.
Pick your flavor. I don't want to go out with nobody. I want to just go to the hotel room and that's it. And I wasn't drinking at the time or doing anything, but I just didn't want to socialize. And Sid was smart. Sid's like, look, we got to go. We got to go.
There were some implications in what you've said earlier. And is there any fear at that point that this is not a pleasant meeting that you're being invited to?
No. That wasn't, I knew Mr. Narita was a good friend of Rue's, and it would be very disrespectful if I didn't go.
Gotcha.
So, and he wanted us to go. Now, the funny thing is, all the great restaurants, and you're in Japan. No, he didn't want to go to McDonald's. He wanted to go to a nice place. But I found it odd that he chose one of the finest Chinese restaurants.
That's interesting.
In Tokyo. And where was it, you ask? It was at the Hilton, which is by Todd Sinclair would know this, by Tokyo Disney World.
Really?
Yeah. There's a beautiful Hilton for the wealthy Japanese families that want to stay in the finest, it's a really nice Hilton.
Wow.
And they had a really nice Chinese restaurant. So we talk about schleppin. I go out, it's me in the car, it's me and Sid and Rue and Ken. And I think there was like, it was sort of a Vanish or a Bronco or whatever. You could fit it. It had an extra row.
Sure.
And Kenta and Morishima came. And then we were meeting Mr. Narita, his son, I think possibly his wife, maybe not. And Rue's son, Mr. Narita, was picking up. Rue had one or two sons. Mm-hmm. So there was about 11 of us, 12 of us at this dinner. And I remember being at a big round table, and it had one of those giant spindle things where the food goes around. And I'm hungry. I'm tired, and I'm hungry.
Been there, yeah.
And the first thing, Ken, who's next to me, and Narita's seat down. I think Sid was on the other side of Ken. Ken says to me, Cary, don't order anything. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, just let Mr. Narita order. Uh-huh. I'm like, oh, okay. Now, I'm straight across. And at this point, although they didn't speak good English at all, I knew Marufuchi and Kenta well enough that, hey, what's up, man? We could just make eye contact, and they were good. They were nice guys.
That's kind of how I got with Tanahashi, with Okada. They speak enough English. I speak no Japanese, so I admire them.
Right.
But you can hold a conversation without speaking.
So I'm just looking at these guys, and I could just get in the eye contact, and when Ken, they knew what Ken was telling me. Mm-hmm. And so everyone's sitting there. So Mr. Narita, the waiter or the waitress come over, and he's talking to him. It seemed like an eternity. Probably was 2 or 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And this food starts coming. And the food starts coming.
Wow.
And there's just lots of food. Now, the conversation was Mr. Ken would say, oh, Sid, Cary, Mr. Narita, he'd like to come to Miami. He loves 60s muscle cars.
Wow. Okay.
And Sid's, I'm just like, Sid's like, oh yeah, Mustangs, Camaros. He goes, and then then Mr. Narita's talking to Ken. And it's like, and Ken says, yes, Mr. Narita would like to go down there and buy many muscle cars. And Sid's like, yeah, sure, we can go. So there's all this. And then, Mr. Narita's talking. There's very few, and Rue's there. Rue's talking. They're speaking Japanese. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing is, Sid, Cary, next time you're at Hammerstein for Final Battle, Mr. Narita wants to be Christmas time, right? And we're like, yeah. It's like the show's like, I think it was December 26th.
Right, yeah.
He could think, they want to come over for holidays. Maybe go see, Cary, maybe you could help get him tickets for Rockettes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So, just like I got Terry Funk tickets for Jersey Boys.
I didn't know that one.
Story, yeah. So, and the great Kenta Kobashi turned down Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Mr. Narita wanted to see, knew about the truth. He knew about the Rockettes. So there's this awkward conversation. Well, the food, but we're eating, right? And I mean, it was pretty much Chinese food like we know.
Sure.
And there's just shrimp and lobster and chicken and meats and soups and dumplings and all this, and it's going around the table, and there's only so much you can eat. And I'm eventually looking over at Morishima, who's, these wrestlers, these aren't really huge guys, but they can eat,
right.
And they're hungry, and they're like getting stuff, and Kenta looks at me and he like points and goes,
Cary's gesticulating to please keep eating.
So
this reminds me of the great Calhoun in Saugus. They treat us right there. But
so we're there, and it's like I'm getting stuffed. And then Ken says, Cary, stand up, please.
Oh, no.
I'm like, why? He goes, just stand up. And he goes, Mr. Narita wants to give you a gift. I'm like, he doesn't have to give me. He goes, and Sid's like, shut up, just take it. Right? So I stand up, and Mr. Narita stands up, and you've seen it.
I've seen it. We have a photo with it.
Right. He hands me this, it's in brown paper. I didn't know what it was. And I say to Ken, I said, what should I do? He goes, oh, you open it. So I open it, and it was a lovely limited edition painting by a famous Japanese artist. It was just very odd. And you've dealt with the Japanese before. When you get into that awkward moment where you thank them and you bow, and they bow, and you bow, and they bow,
and then you try and shake their hand, and then you realize it's the bow.
But it's a bowing fest.
Yes, yeah, and no one wants to stop because no one wants to. Yeah.
So I'm like,
you just described me and Takahashi's relationship.
Oh, beautiful! It's beautiful, wonderful, right? So it finally, and then they want dessert. All right, fine. So now we're eating ice cream and whatever. So,
what flavor does Kenta get? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Okay. Probably vanilla.
I just wanted to throw you a loop there. Please.
So it's finally time to leave. Finally. And although, it was very nice, except for the fact that, I knew that I was facing a tremendous financial beating for this weekend.
Yeah.
So as we're leaving, Ken says, Sid, Cary, Mr. Narita wants to talk to you outside.
Oh, no.
I'm like, so we go to the van.
Do you have anxiety now?
A little bit.
Okay.
So Sid and I are in the back. Rue is in the front. Ken acquiesced, and the wrestlers knew not to get in.
Interesting.
And Mr. Narita gets in the front, and he turns around, and he hands us 2 large envelopes. Like when you at the bank kind of envelopes.
You take out money.
Right, but these are stuffed.
Really?
And I'm just like, oh, thank you, Mr. Narita. Well, I hope, we'll see you in, New York, at Final. You don't have to, Ken's just like, Cary, just take it. So I'm like, what's going on here? So it was like $30,000.
What?
Yeah, like $15,000 in each envelope.
Holy crap!
I don't know what Mr. Narita did. My worry was like maybe I'm indebted to this guy in some way.
Right.
But Ken assured me that this is a gift, and and I think this was expressed in the car before he left. When we didn't know the amount he'd given us. Mr. Narita knows that you had a bad time with Dragon Gate. And he's a big fan.
Wow.
And he's a generous man. And he loves Noah, Pro Wrestling Noah. Mm-hmm. And he loves Ring of Honor. And it's his gift to you.
Wow. And
we're like, fortunately, we were in the back seat, so I didn't have to go into the bowing routine. But we shook his hand. Wow. And we went into the night. And now I'm with Ken and Rue, and I'm like, what's Ken? And Rue spoke English. He just
Yeah.
Rue just said, just take it. So amazing. It basically covered the weekend. Mr. Narita did not come to Final Battle that year, and it's really sad what happened to Rue. Business got really rough for Pro Wrestling Noah, who's still around.
Right.
And
still produced great wrestling.
Great wrestling. Yeah. And Mr. Rue was found. This is still when I owned the company.
Wow.
He was found on the highway. He killed himself. One gun, and he had a wife and kid. He was so. It was such a thing of pride. And it wasn't some other dirty dealings. It was a suicide, and a couple years later, through Ken, we found out that Mr. Narita was murdered.
Oh.
We don't know by who.
Yeah.
And how about that for an episode?
Wow. Yeah, you've told me bits and pieces of that off the air, but we haven't heard that one.
Yeah, so the next morning when we were going to the airport, I was just paying cash to these guys.
Yeah. Just to get rid of it.
Right? Why not? Right?
Wow.
Because we owed them anyway.
Yeah.
So that was, and then I flew back with Sweeney. Sweeney and I were in first class. I know guys like Aries and Aries particularly was like, what's he doing? He figured something was up with me and Sweeney, and there was nothing up with us. We were just good friends, and because we were all on the same plane, and that trip. I don't speak bad. If anything, I've been very complimentary to Gabe, and but he wouldn't let go of this Dragon Gate thing, even though they didn't make any effort to sell these tickets, and they're running a show in the same town, be it 40 miles away.
Wow!
And that was because the change in management, backstage management came briefly after that.
Right.
So that's I wasn't even expecting to do this, but that was a little story about our trip to Japan, number 2.
Wow, that's a heck of a story, and one that I would have been shaking if in that situation, because of I think some of the connotations and implications of what was said. Ring of Honor's partner, New Japan's owned by a trading card company at this point. So, when you meet folks that don't have necessarily a title, it makes me nervous, whether it's in the United States or Japan or wherever. And Cary, I admire your courage. I admire your.
Well, there was nothing we can do. I mean, and once again, we knew that the Noah people were really good people.
Yeah.
So if they're friends of Noah, they're friends of ours. And made for a hell of a story, that's for sure.
Sure did. And those matches are phenomenal. You can go back and watch them. Some of them I know they've been digitized. I know that particular show's coming to Honor Club soon.
I want to see night 2.
Yep.
Of where just to see the lack of people in the building. Because it wound up only being, even with Noah trying to give tickets away,
right.
We're lucky if there was 150 people there.
And I can tell you that's deflating. I mean, we've Ring of Honor. I think it's no secret. We've done Madison Square Garden in front of almost 20,000. In the same year, we went to Wales for the first time and had about 250 people. And even the night before in London, we had 600, 700. The night after, we had 400, 500. There's a big difference.
Yes,
there's a huge difference. Just from the feeling in the crowd, you can hear individual conversations sometimes. And I'd almost rather have the empty arena at that point when you have that disappointing of a night. And thankfully, Ring of Honor in 2020 had a record in St. Louis. We broke our St. Louis attendance record. We had a great time in Baltimore, Free Enterprise. Nashville, we had a great turnout, almost 1,000 there. But when you hit that low,
I remember watching on Honor Club the Wales one.
Right.
It was, hey, listen, we all I made some horrible decisions logistically on where to go, but that was a big mistake.
Right.
to go to Wales. And I remember, it was just a couple of rows of people and maybe some people in the bleachers, and you could hear these, when you could hear the people, and the crowd's quiet.
They're very quiet in England. And if they're not chanting, they're extremely quiet.
Right.
If they're not singing, they're extremely quiet.
So it was very awkward, but it happens. Hey, it happened. It happens. Listen, in the beginning of the Beatles' career,
right?
In the beginning of Elton John's career, they played in front of 20 people somewhere.
There's the famous Bob Seger story where he gets tens of thousands to the Pontiac Silverdome, and then either a few nights later or the very next night, he's in Cleveland or he's in some other town, can barely draw a couple hundred.
And speaking of Bob Seger, I hate to end on another death, but there's so many great sax parts.
Yes.
In these Bob Seger songs.
Yeah.
AJ, figure them cliched or not, there's some just epic rock and roll and some great sax parts, like on Main Street.
Yeah.
Or what's the one? Here I am on the road again.
Yeah, Turn the Page.
Turn the Page, right?
Yeah.
Which Metallica covered.
Nine Tonight to me is the best.
Right. And it was alto reed.
Yeah.
And a good friend of mine, my friend Matt Lee, who I talked to, he's my age. I know him many years. He's in the music business. He's a publicist, and he's in Detroit. And all those guys, still live in Michigan for the most part. And Alto Reed, 72 years old, passed away last week. So we tip our hat to Alto Reed for he, and Matt said to me, he goes, Bob Seger's Bob Seger, but Alto Reed was such an important part of that band, that sound.
Well, that's like the new Springsteen album. There's the single Letter to You. It feels like there should be a big saxophone solo at about the 3-minute mark. And that shows you that Springsteen was one thing, but Springsteen and Clarence Clemens were a whole other ballgame. And I think the same could probably be said about Bob Seger and Alto Reed.
Well, it was a fun episode. The good thing about Alto Reed is his music is with us, and it's made a difference to so many people and will make a difference for many years to come, just like this podcast.
There you go. And speaking of this, the fun doesn't stop here, Cary. We have 55 and 5 on youtube.com/Ian Riccaboni. And 55 and 5 is coming in audio form to adfreeshows.com.
Yes. We thank Conrad Thompson.
Yes. And another new series. If you haven't had enough of me and Cary, tell them about. We're filming in a museum. We're recording in a museum right now. By museum, I mean your house. But tell them what we'll be doing on adfreeshows.com.
I want to announce it right. It's on Conrad Thompson's ad-free platform.
Adfreeshows.com, where you can get Jim Ross's podcast. You can get Eric Bischoff, Tony Schiavone, Arn Anderson, Chris Pritchard. How
does the video work under that?
Easy. So you go to adfreeshows.com, you pick the Patreon tier that you want to subscribe to, and by paying the nominal fee, by subscribing to adfreeshows.com, you can get those 5 podcasts without the advertisements. And he's got some great sponsors for those shows, but you don't have to hear them. You're essentially paying for the privilege of not listening to the ads. And you get a lot of great extra content. You get the Blue Meanies doing a show with Joel Gertner now that you can watch on video. You get some great extra content with Eric Bischoff, with Tony Schiavone, with Jim Ross. And now we're excited to be part of that group.
They're going to be getting, thanks to our producer, AJ from Bassan Creative, the fans are going to be getting the poster of the week.
Yeah.
Ian referenced this is a museum. Well, I've been collecting posters, and we might throw a rock and roll one in at some point too, but wrestling posters through the magic of eBay for the last many, many years. And so we figured, and I share them online often, and it's a great piece of history, and it'll be available on Conrad's ad-free platform.
Yeah, if you go to adfreeshows.com, you can pick your Patreon tier. It's super easy. You can download the Patreon app. Once you're subscribed, you log in. Your membership's right there. You can access all the videos, all the audio. There's special RSS links and feeds so that you can get the ad-free podcasts. That would be, Jim Ross. That would be Tony Schiavone. Those guys, they're ad-free versions right in your podcast app that you listen to Last Stop Penn Station in. So it's a very cool service. We're excited to partner with Conrad. It's been a long time coming. We've been doing this. We've been flirting. We've been flirting with Conrad for a while. And we're excited to finally jump aboard and be a part of the mothership at freeshows.com. But you can continue to listen to Last Stop Penn Station the way you always do. And we thank you for listening. We're excited for 2021. Cary, this time next week, I won't be in the bubble. We'll have another new one coming for you that'll be rather timely. We're going to see if the president's decided upon by the vice president and the Congress. In the Georgia races, we're recording right now as those are being decided by the voters of Georgia.
Yeah, let's hope it comes out. Well, for me, there's a change in the Senate. Mm-hmm. Democrats get the Senate. But next week, we'll also be having a birthday party episode.
Whoa! Can't believe it.
Ian's birthday is the following day. So
yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully I get a
the
great...
ripe old age of what?
34.
Oh,
mid-30s.
Old man, look at my life. 34.
You know, back in the 1770s, I'd be an old man right now.
Yeah.
I'd be an elder statesman.
Well, 34, and there's so much more.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's been a good 33 so far, so can't wait for number 34.
Well, please subscribe. If you want to buy a T-shirt, we have the Last Stop Penn Station T-shirts, the popular He Eats Breakfast, the Camel T-shirts, available on Pro Wrestling Tees. We want to thank AJ again and Eric from Discover Pro Wrestling, and looking forward to coming at you again next week.
And we will be same place, same time, right here at Last Stop Penn Station. For Cary, Lambchop, AJ, thanks for listening.
I thank God it stole the handle, and the train it won't stop going, no, it could slow down.
We hail you for listening to Last Stop Penn Station podcast. Rate, review, like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or at laststoppennstation.com.